Well, of course, over the weekend, we saw a severe weather outbreak with some blizzard conditions, high winds thrown in there, tornadoes. I mean, it just felt like everything was seen in various parts of the country. And it sounds like it's going to be another active weather week ahead. Let's talk about it. Joining us now, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. And Eric, good to catch up with you and our thoughts and prayers with anyone affected by this severe adverse weather we saw over the weekend. I know plenty of tornadoes in parts of the Midwest, Mid South, that huge dust storm as well. I just a lot of adverse weather impacts we saw over the last couple of days, Eric.
Yeah, I felt a little guilty watching it this weekend, and here's the reason why. Because for the preceding weeks, I've been telling folks all over the country, I want 5 or 6 of these big storms, and I think what I was doing is I was thinking too far forward. Because what do storms like this do? They can return moisture. They can give you what you need later by giving it to you now, so you can store it up in the soil. But when one goes through and produces 1,500 reports of severe weather damage, including a whole lot of tornadoes. I don't know what the official count is, but we had some strong ones, some that hit Missouri, some that hit. I mean, it was Jesse. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of damage. And then you add to that the fact that we had dust from Mexico, New Mexico, and Texas that blew all the way across my home state of Illinois, all the way through Wisconsin into the UP of Michigan. And you just look at all of that and you're going, wow, what does this tell me? Then you're right. Today we've got high wind warnings and washes for the plains, red flag warnings again, which is a fire threat. We at the same time where we have red flag warnings, we have winter storm watches for the backside of a system midweek, which could bring in again blizzard conditions. And you just start thinking this through. So I'm going to give you an idea to think about here. My good friend and colleague, he's actually a former student of mine, Matt Reardon. I think Matt's been on with you before, maybe. But Matt and I just walked in this morning to the office and started saying this one thing about the weather. Set aside the models, set aside the data, set aside the academic part of what we do every day, and just witness the weather, right? Just go look at it. And now, is it normal to have, a little bit of wild and crazy spring weather in the Midwest? Sure. I mean, we do. The Corn Belt is known for that.
Mhm.
But I step back and I go, man, has it gotten hot in March so far? Then I say, we keep seeing these massive temperature swings followed by blizzard conditions. And then we warm up the next day into the 70s. And then you say a dust storm from New Mexico that got to the UP, something feels off. And it's not to raise hype. That's never what we're trying to do here. But we're not going to ignore some of these signs. And I was just talking to, Arlen Suderman, right?
Yeah.
Arlen and I were going back and forth this morning. And I said, Arlen, here's something you can't forget. A year ago, right now, we had watched drought area drop all winter long into spring, such that the whole country was down to 21% in D1 to D4 drought. And then you look at it today, we're at 42% of the country in D1 to D4 drought, with 2/3 of the land area in some form of drought. That includes the D0 category. So it's one of those years for me, it feels like that we're going to be taking part of the country and not just making them. I think I said this to you last week, not just like the haves and have nots. That's a common phrase, but it's going to be like the haves way, way, way too much and the have not at all.
Mhm.
And I'm worried that the Mississippi River is that dividing line this year. And so there's too many things that are pushing us toward a highly anomalous year so far. And unless something comes along to break that, then I think we're going to be talking like this most Monday mornings for a while.
Well, and you brought up the pattern for this week, some of this heavy snow potential in the Midwest and more severe weather, et cetera. But thinking about this drought picture,
Yeah.
how do things look? Did the system that went through this big storm over the weekend to help some areas? Could this week's system help? I mean, what is that drought outlook right now, Eric?
Oh, yeah, it's gonna help Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota. They're gonna get the snow out of this. It's gonna help Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. It's gonna hit Kentucky and Tennessee, which have already had flooding. The rest of the Mid-South, you guys, I mean, you're gonna see it too. But it's the fact that I can't get moisture from these systems back into Texas, Oklahoma, and parts of Kansas or Colorado, which, by the way, on satellite today, there is what we call a hydraulic jump coming off of the Colorado Rockies. That's where the downslope winds bounce back up and create this really amazing cloud field. I do not want to be flying into Denver today. That's the point to make. But that's again another odd and anomalous weather event. I mean, my former research advisor wrote about hydraulic jumps in his book. Guess what chapter it's in? It's in his mountain weather drought chapter, right? So you start thinking about those things, and it just you get concerned. So yeah. Now think about the plains. They had an incredible November. That moisture brought them a few months. They then had a week and a half ago a storm system that came along the Panhandle through the Red River that got all the way down to the southeast. But it was narrow. On either side, we were dry. And we know this. I mean, in agriculture, we understand 2 or 3 weeks of dry conditions in the plains with winds and heat, and it just doesn't matter what you had before. And that's what we're kind of going into here. And so I'm just concerned about it. And like I always say, I'll be concerned about it until something changes it, and I'm not concerned anymore. So I just want folks to know that.
How about South America? Let's talk there a little bit as we're working through their harvest and the safrita corn growing season in Brazil. How are things looking in the Southern Hemisphere this week, Eric?
Yeah, so if there's a problem area right now in Brazil, it's going to be in eastern Brazil. So Goiás, Tocantins, Minas Gerais, and Bahia. And I looked this morning at their combined, those are 4 big states. I looked at their combined NDVI values. Again, they're the area that's in drought. And it is now outside of the 2001 to 2023 range, like way outside of it and just plummeting. Mato Grosso, which grows 50% of that safrinha crop, we're not seeing the major problems there. Okay, just not yet. But then in southern Brazil, there's some risk of pockets of dryness, but that's not necessarily a red flag until it's weeks of that. Argentina's had some huge storms as of late, but that's only going to be affecting their mid to late planted crop, which is going to affect it in a positive way, except for where there was some storm damage. So here's the long and short of it. Last week when we talked, that area that's in drought in eastern Brazil was forecast by the new long range models to be very wet all the way through early April. And I said, we got to watch this because it could just be the models doing model things, right? They sometimes go off. So what happened all week long? The model just backed off every single day. And if you go look right now at the amount of rain expected between now and April 21st, compared to a week ago, it's less than half of what the models were predicting a week ago. So now you got me thinking, are we going to be watching some pressure come in on the eastern side of Brazil? Now, how much is it? It's like 15% of their acres. So it's not a lot, but it's enough. We'll be probably getting the information of that come mid-April. And by mid-April, what will we also know in the U.S.? Planning intentions much better. We'll know how quickly we're able to get into fields. If the drought expands, there could be a lot of things that constructively add together at that point to have weather be a major part of the market story. And just maybe, but that's the way it always is. Weather just tends to creep up and all of a sudden become the headline. But we need to know about these things now so that we're prepared for them when they do occur. So yeah, watch South America pretty closely.
How about the Black Sea? I should ask you over there. That's something we haven't talked about in a few weeks. How are conditions there now, and what should we be paying attention to as we get into the summer months, Eric?
So the Black Sea area had a couple of pretty cold bouts in the middle of winter, and there was some question if there's enough snow to insulate the winter wheat. So I don't know what we're going to get out of there in terms of winter wheat kill, but there was a sudden stratospheric warming event 2 weeks ago, and there was all sorts of news and rumor that the Black Sea is going to hit with monstrously cold weather, and it just didn't. This is now in March. It's quite mild there, and that's an interesting thing to think about because some of the new long-range forecast models just released over the weekend. This is one produced by Columbia University. They are trying to place a Western Corn Belt drought in the United States. That includes the Northern Plains, and they're trying to put drought in Ukraine. Now, if those 2 epicenters get hit in the middle of summer at the same time, man, that's a combination that, I don't know. It just makes me tell you that I still think everything is spring loaded. And if these weather events do manifest themselves the way that some of these models are suggesting, boy, we've got something that will really be hitting big headlines. And you know what else, Jesse? If it fails, it's going to be an epic failure. What I mean by that is if all these projections for drought don't occur, man, the market's going to eat that alive. And I just think we're sitting at a very important time period. I think these next 6 weeks, every Monday when we talk, will be very telling as to where the risk goes. Does it increase or does it decrease? But you got to watch that area as well. Now, a couple of areas I don't have my finger on the pulse of. I'm not yet settled on China. Most long-range models are trying to give China plenty of spring rain. Same thing with India, which is rare because India doesn't typically pick up its rains until June, July, August, September, but some of them have the rains coming in April and May. Indonesia's got a ton of rain right now. It's going to actually bleed into northern Australia as well. So it's interesting how the hemispheres are split up with where there is and is not drought right now.
Well, I know folks can stay up to date with the latest weather forecasts at agweather.com, ag-wx.com for more. Always appreciate it. Eric Snodgrass, Nutrient Ag Solutions. Have a great week, buddy. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep, sounds good, Jesse. See ya.